Hello, friends, and welcome to Ripley's Aquarium of Canada. My name is Danielle, and my camera person, his name is Toki, and we are going to be sharing with you about the red-side dace and the sea lampreys. For our talk today, we'll just go over our land acknowledgement first, and then we will get into the feeding and the cool vampire suction part. So Ripley's Aquarium of Canada acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. All right, friends, so today we are currently looking at the red-side dace that we have here at the aquarium. As always, we have opportunities to answer any questions you have, so please leave them in the comment section below, and we will answer those at the end of our talk. You are looking at these little animals, which are called red-side dace. Red-side dace get that beautiful red color to their sides by eating insects in their natural habitat because they have carotenoids in them, which is the same stuff that's in carrots that make them orange. And what you're seeing right now is what they do to hunt those insects in their natural habitat. They can actually jump almost their whole body length out of the water to catch insects. Right now, we're actually not feeding them any insects. They are eating Pacifica krill, which is what we feed a lot of our animals here. It's just a very small shrimp. And these little fish are able to jump out and eat them. In their natural habitat, they like to live in gravel bottom areas that are clear and cold and usually slower moving water. And that also usually has a little bit of vegetation cover on the edges, which will attract insects to the habitat nearby so they can eat them. They're very picky eaters in nature, and they usually only eat insects, but we can get away with feeding them shrimp here. These animals are actually in the minnow group. I know you've probably heard the word minnow used to describe any small fish, but it actually describes just a type of fish that remains small their whole lives. And this one actually is one of those. It's in the minnow group. There are lots of other fish that start out small and then grow really, really big, and those would not be in that group. Because this animal is so small, it's obviously predated on by a lot of larger fish that live in the Great Lakes habitat, because these animals are local. They live in and around the GTA. Around 80% of them live around this area in the Greater Toronto area. And their main predators would be things like trout, bass, walleye, perch, any of the larger fish that would live in that habitat that would think, wow, a small fish is kind of yummy. Even like turtles and birds might try to eat them as well because they do live in that habitat space. However, these animals are not doing very well in their natural habitat, and that is mainly because of habitat loss. So because they require trees to be in their habitat or vegetation like plants to cover their area where they live for their food, with lots of development and lots of agricultural runoff and even animals waste from farms ending up in the water, that creates a really poor habitat for these animals. They can no longer survive in that environment. So their population is not doing so well. It's actually ranked as endangered. And that would be in our area here where 80% of the population lies. So you might wonder how we got these animals. Well, they were actually bred in a captive environment. They were bred at a facility, and then we got them here to showcase this animal so you can see how cool they are and what they look like, and maybe think about ways that you can help them in their own natural habitats. So one of the easiest ways is to clean up where you can, because garbage impacts all aquatic life, including the ones that live near us here. But also think about the positive actions you can take about sharing about this animal. This beautiful animal that has gorgeous red stripes and jumps out of the water to eat a very picky food like insects are not doing so well, and we can do our part to help. You can even volunteer with programs to help kind of understand where their population is. We know where they are during their summer months, but we actually have no idea where they go in their winter months when they migrate. So it's great to just learn that information and to help out if you can. And I do find this animal quite fascinating. One of the coolest things I learned about this animal is that they actually don't take care of their young, which is not a very rare thing in fish, and many fish do not take care of their young. But this one actually has a nanny. They will lay their eggs in the nests of common shiners and creek chubs. And then those two minnow species would take care of their young. So these animals are dependent on not only a really good habitat space that's clean and clear water with rocky bottom, and also has the insects above with the trees and the plants, but also they need two other species of animals to take care of their young. So they're very highly dependent on an ecosystem that is really healthy. So if you ever see a red-side dace in the habitat you're looking into, that means that that habitat is a really healthy space, and that is a great thing to see. But we're going to switch gears and kind of talk about what is impacting the Great Lakes habitats. And I know that there's a lot of pollution. There's pretty much every type of pollution in that habitat. But there's also a lot of invasive species. And we're going to focus on the vampire one today, and that is the lamprey. And Toki's just showing you our lamprey exhibit. You can see one of them swimming around right now. It's a rarity. They're pretty lazy. I know they look a lot like an eel, but they're not an eel. They are what we call a primitive fish. Pretty much the things that make you a fish are a jaw and a backbone, and they lack both of those. So they're in this own little category of not a fish and not really an invertebrate either. So I like to call them a primitive fish. So I said that they are invasive. One of the problems with invasive animals is that they come from somewhere else and they're brought to that new place by people, maybe on purpose, maybe not. And if they were to come all on their own, we would call it migration. So if they're coming by humans, then it would be an invasive species, and they do lots of things that would negatively impact the new habitat they are in. So that would mean that they are able to survive in that space. Because we experience winter here, it is not an easy space for an animal to survive in. And this animal naturally comes from the Atlantic Ocean, which is a colder space. Where they live in the colder parts of the Atlantic Ocean. And they also are able to outcompete for food. This animal sucks blood and body fluids from larger fish in the Great Lakes habitat. And normally in their natural habitat would do that to larger fish, like a tuna. They have a high reproduction rate. So this animal can have around 100,000 eggs each breeding season, which is a lot. And because very few animals like to eat them, they are able to have lots of babies that will survive. And because there's not that many predators at any of their life stages, they're just able to populate our Great Lakes really quickly. So we're going to show you something really cool that the lamprey can do because they are highly adapted to getting food in a unique way, which is why we think they're vampires. So this is Josh. Can Josh give us a wave first? Hi, Josh. Perfect. This is our lamprey that you can see here. Oh, we have two in the bucket. Awesome. And you can see he's wearing a glove, and that is to protect his hand from the temperature of the water. It is at 6.7 degrees Celsius, which is super chilly. And these animals are going to use their suction. Oh, wow, that's amazing. And I know a lot of you might think, oh no, Josh is going to get hurt. He's not. They are not going to do anything harmful to him. They're actually past their parasitic life stage. So when these animals are born in eggs, they're hatched in river areas, and they live as larvae for maybe up to 7 years. And then after that, they transition into their adult phase. And that adult phase is 12 to 18 months long. So it's a year to a year and a half long, which is not very long. And that's their parasitic life stage, where they can, well, it's a good shot of their mouth, where they can suction onto other things and suck their blood. I'm actually going to show you a really good shot of what their mouth looks like. You can see there, they have those horny teeth that are on the outside rim. Those are made with keratin, which is the same material you would find in your nails, your hair, turtle shells, fish scales. It's a very common material. And they can use this suction cup to suction on the side of fish and suck out their blood and body fluids. And they are doing that with that tongue that you can see in the center. And that can pierce the side of fish scales and skin to enjoy that blood. And that is what they are feeding off of. The fish that we have here, these lamprey, are not actually in that parasitic stage anymore. They're past that, which would be the reproductive stage. And we're able to extend their life in a captive environment by just lowering the temperature of the water. So it slows their metabolism down and extends their life to maybe up to a year. So these animals, we got them from the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, which has a website with tons of sea lamprey information. So if you want to check that out, more than happy to share that with all of you. And they catch them for us to share with you about how dangerous they are to our fish stocks. So just to share with you what they have done in the past, we first observed them in 1835 in only Lake Ontario. So they would come in through the St. Lawrence River to Lake Ontario. And then when the Welland Canal was built in 1929, which is almost 100 years later, they were able to occupy all 5 lakes, and it only took them 10 years to do so. They are very agile swimmers, as you can obviously see, and they're very good at getting to new places. The Welland Canal made it easier for us to ship big vehicles, like big ships, through the Great Lakes. And because of that, these animals have been able to get a lot of different places. And we've been trying to put up barriers and chemicals in the water called lampricides that actually harm the juvenile life stage of this animal in order to help protect the population. Just to give you a summary of what they have done in the past, we generally eat a lot of fish from the Great Lakes, and one of those fish we eat is lake trout. Before lampreys were really in that area, we used to catch around 15 million pounds of lake trout in a season. And by the year 1960, which would be after the invasion, they only caught around 300,000 pounds, which is 2% of the previous value. So it dropped the stock a lot. With the amount of extra precautions that we're taking, like barriers, lampricides, knowledge being shared, we've actually been able to reduce the lamprey population by 90% of what its earlier values were. And because of that, we've actually made a big difference in our world and helped the animals out. Oh, that's a great shot of what they look like suctioned onto his hand. And you can see they're leaving like a little bit of a mark on his hand, but it's not doing any damage at all. I'm going to show you what it looks like when they suction onto another animal. So this is a trout. And lampreys normally will prey on those in our Great Lakes habitats, which would harm our fishery and any animals that would prey on those, like bigger fish or bigger birds. And they actually are able to fatally wound 1 in 7 of those fish. And that's because an animal in this space that's not used to having an animal like this in their habitat is not used to surviving it. There are lampreys that naturally live in this space, and they're quite a bit smaller, and they're okay with having a little lesion on their bodies. But if a lamprey were to suction onto a fish, they drain most of their body fluids, and then they leave a gaping wound that can't heal properly. Because this animal's normally in the ocean where there's larger fish, it would largely those fish would be able to survive that negative interaction with the lamprey because they've evolved together. Because it's an invasive species, they don't have that co-evolution factor. This is a little different. If Josh can pick it up again, I just want to show you some features that the lamprey have. So if you look closely at their bodies, they have gill slits on the sides of their bodies. That's how they're breathing. And one very good nostril on the top of their head. Oh yeah, so you can see those gill slits. Those are the holes on the side. And then at the very top of their head, and there's their eye. And then at the very top of their head, they have a nostril that's very good at smelling. So they're able to get to those fish they're trying to eat very quickly. So these animals, I know you might be a little afraid. They're not actually going to hurt a human. They might latch onto a human, but realize we have a different skin feel. And we also smell like our odor is different in the water compared to a fish. So they will detach quite readily. So it's not like a leech that they'll keep on. But other ways that we can help out, not only just sharing your knowledge and talking about these lovely animals. Like I know that they're kind of creepy looking, but I think that they're kind of fascinating being able to survive in a totally different habitat space. Like they came from the Atlantic Ocean where it's salty water and they used to migrate inland freshwater just to reproduce. And now they're completely freshwater animals. That is an amazing amount of adaptive success that this animal has, which is really cool. But also just being aware of invasive species. So if you happen to go fishing and you catch an animal and it has a lamprey on it, you're not actually allowed. Oh, you're seeing the teeth that you can see on Josh's hand. So they made impressions on his hand. That's pretty cool. You're not actually allowed to put back the animal that you caught that has a lamprey on it. You don't want to put the lamprey back in the water because they are super invasive. If you want to read up more, again, I'll share that website again for the sea lampreys. Look at your municipality's website on fishing rules so that we are always following the correct rules for your fishing areas. If you're going to catch animals in our natural habitat, just follow the rules and regulations set forth. Scientists have made those rules because we don't want to negatively impact the population. We don't want to take out too many of the animals. But also just be generally aware of how these animals have spread and other ways that maybe the red-side dace could be harmed. So red-side dace is not currently harmed by invasive species as much as some other animals are. However, just cleaning up where you can, using reusables, and learning and sharing what you know will make a giant difference. So friends, if you have any questions at all, please remember to share them below and I will answer what I can. All right, I'm just going to check to see if we have any questions. Oh, I have a question here from Jennifer. It says, where do the teeth go and what blood do they eat? So their teeth are always on inside their mouth. So I can show the image again of their teeth. So their teeth are always inside their mouth, and their mouth doesn't really close like ours does. So they're always there, and they will get new teeth over time because they don't last forever. And the blood that they're eating is mostly fish blood. So they are going to be getting that out of those fish that are in that habitat. So like trout or bass or any of the larger fish are the ones that they're probably going to be eating from and suctioning from their bodies. And they are actually quite effective at gaining that sort of nutrition for their bodies. And they're using it kind of like a mosquito does. They're using it to help them to get to the reproductive stage. So the stage that our lampreys are in is called senescence, which is a very common animal phase where they're at that last end of life cycle. So these animals are one of the animals that has one reproductive season. So they can live for a maximum of around 9 years, and we can extend their lifespan just by creating a cold habitat for them to survive in. So that 6-degree water temperature makes them really nice and chilly in there. And you can see, I think we just put the lampreys back in, so they're moving around quite a bit. How long have these fish been on Earth? Excellent question. They've been on Earth for a really, really long time, like longer than the dinosaurs. It's 340 million years. So they've been around for a really, really long time. And they've pretty much been kind of the same for that long. So they're a animal that has been around for a long time and generally has been parasitic that whole time as well. Not all lampreys are parasitic, by the way. This species is, there are 4 species that live in the Great Lakes, and then also this one on top, that's the invasive one. But there are 4 native species in the Great Lakes, and 2 of them are parasitic, and the other 2 are not. What do lamprey eggs look like? I have absolutely no idea. Thank you, Rachel. That was a good stumper question. I'm going to guess that they're probably a clear. They're probably hard to find because our ability of maintaining the population at a lower level is actually not impacting the eggs, but impacting the larva. So the larva will live in streams and eat organic material like microorganisms, and we will use lampricides, which is a special chemical that actually only impacts young lampreys, doesn't impact the habitat, doesn't impact other animals that live there. And that is one of the ways that we're able to reduce their numbers pretty easily. And another question from Rachel is, are these creatures endangered? So the red-side dace is endangered, but the lamprey is not. It's actually doing great in all of its habitat spaces. If it's in an invasive space, it's doing really well, which is not really good for us, but I suppose for the lamprey, if you're a lamprey, it's a good spot. Next question is, can you find them in the ocean or the lake? You can find them in both. Sea lampreys can still be found in the Atlantic Ocean, which is their natural native habitat. And they normally went inland to freshwater to reproduce, so you could normally find them in rivers. But now you can find them in all 5 Great Lakes. And possibly in the future, they might go farther from the Great Lakes tributaries area, but that's as far as they've got so far. Oh, and these species of lamprey are called sea lampreys, which are Petromyzon marinus. There are 41 species of lampreys in total. So there are a fair number. They are around the world animals. You can find them in lots of places. Some of them might be at a different endangered level, like they might have a different status. The ones that we have around here are not doing poorly. The 4 native ones are not doing that badly, and this one is obviously invasive and doing great on its own. All right, friends, I don't see any more questions popping up in the chat. If you have any additional questions, feel free to leave them there and we will get back to you at a later time. Our next chat will be again next Thursday. Actually, it'll be next Wednesday. Woo! It'll be the really, really awesome pumpkin carving under the sea with a diver. It'll be amazing. You get to see our rainbow reef habitat, and I hope that we get to see you then. Bye for now.